But first, we're going to talk with Rachel. She's with us live on the studio. So, donc, comme je vous l'ai dit, on va le faire en anglais, mais je vais traduire le mieux que je puisse, le mieux que je peux. Ce qu'elle va nous dire. The first question is quite an easy one. Well, maybe a tough one. Maybe the toughest one, but an easy one. Do you remember, we'll begin by the beginning. Do you remember when you thought to yourself, okay, I want to do animation? Not when you like animation, but really when you said, that's going to be maybe my job and I will earn a little bit of money with that.
That's a difficult question. I mean, I don't think I got into animation because I ever thought I'll make money off that, honestly. But I did have a moment, I think, that I remember when I just started playing with it just after high school. A friend told me, I think, you should do some stop motion animation. And I remember it was so satisfying. There was something about it that was completely magical, that kind of combined my love for cinema and art and just playfulness in one action. And I just found myself completely falling in love with this field. I think professionally, I'm still kind of shocked that it's even possible to do it as a profession, but it's for now fingers crossed that it will continue. I find myself working in the field in a lot of different branches of it, but for as much as it works, I'm in it for myself.
Tell us a little bit about, there is this wonderful school, well, what I saw about it in Israel called Bezalel. You went there and a lot of actually directors that we know now from Israel are coming from Bezalel. I'm sure there is other school and sometimes we say other school, but really Bezalel is something quite important today.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's interesting. I think the phenomenon of what is happening in Bezalel, there's a few schools like this that I noticed in the world, in Europe specifically, that kind of creates a lot of hotels or really directors. My theory about it, but besides Bezalel being, I think, a very strong school in a lot of ways, I think my theory is that because it comes from this kind of a separated a little bit place, a small place with not a lot of funding. There's not a lot of animation industry in Israel for now. I mean, it's starting to develop, but it's a very new thing. And I think the way they teach it is kind of preparing you for a very tough reality professionally. So they try to give you tools to do basically everything by yourself, kind of assuming that you're gonna do it like this, that it's not gonna be very well paid, that it's not gonna have a very high budget, and you just have to do it very guerrilla style. And I think that's something that really defines a lot of the art studies in Israel in general, and specifically in animation. It's very clear. So the directors come with a lot of the ability to create, to produce a lot by themselves. And I think it's a very strong point for the school in that sense.
It's 3 years, 4 years, 5 years?
4 years.
4 years.
4 years.
You do what? A lot of films, experimentation?
Well, it starts, the first 2 years are pretty just basic animation studies. You try a little bit of everything. And in the third year, you get divided to 3 courses. You can choose if you go to 3D, classical, or stop motion. And stop motion is kind of a tricky definition because it's run by, at the time that I was studying there, it's run by Ronnie Oren, who's a very senior animator in Israel who did a lot of work and was one of the first ones who really actually did animation in Israel, actively creating films and commercials. And he teaches a very interesting course, I think, in the third year that really defines the rest of your studies in the department. And it's this course that is kind of like a laboratory, kind of like the room that we are sitting now, with a table where all the students are sitting around the table, maybe 8 or so, because it's always a very small group. And every week you bring a lot of different creations, animative sequences, ideas that you have, and you kind of analyze them together as a group. And this approach is very liberating. You go and you do a lot of individual research. And I think this is also one of the things regarding your last question that also gives a lot of creative thought into the studies in Bezalel.
You could be critical. I mean, because what I think in France, it's always terrible in animation because a lot of people just say, "Oh, that's really nice what you're doing," but they're not. For me, that's my point of view, critical enough, but in a good way. Are you, the 8 of you could be, oh, well, you could have done that this way or this way? Can you do that?
Bezalel is very critical. I would say that it's a very, very critical school. All the classes, specifically this class, I think was one with a very good balance, because the discussion was open to everyone, so the students could be critical towards themselves and their friends in the same way as the teacher is, and there was something very very direct, very healthy about that. So I think yes, definitely there's a lot of critical thought in that class.
It's actually in your third year. I'm trying to get my note back. That's the same. It's in the same year actually that you try to that you begin to experiment on seal screen prints with Rechet. It's quite abstract. You're going, and there is even a walk. You have this exercise of the walk, and we're gonna talk. But yeah, that's where you begin to have this style.
The technique. It started there. It's true. I think in that course there was this exercise, a weekly exercise, that you have to go out and find animative sequences in the world. So a lot of people do a lot of things with shapes, like you photograph shapes everywhere, stuff like that. It's very good, very healthy exercise, I think, for the mind in general. But I kind of went somewhere a little bit different, and I just wandered into the serography, right? In French, serography department. It's in the art department. There is a workshop there. And a friend just kind of introduced me a little bit to the place. I started working there a little bit, and very fast I found something interesting in this ability to kind of make duplicates of the same print. I don't know exactly how, but I found a connection to animation in that, and I started really developing the technique there. At first it was very frustrating, also in the workshop, in the like in the middle of the school with a lot of people, and of course it's animation, so it's so many prints always, like everyone is making 1 or 2, I'm making 20 now. So it was a very interesting thing, and really like Reshet and the walk, they were both made that year. I think they were both made even in the workshop in Bezalel at the time, and I spent many hours there. It's a very beautiful place, so it was nice, and it was kind of the beginning of this technique and all of this animative road in that year.
פעם אחת היית מוכר בקיוסק. ידעתי את זה בגלל הדרך שבה החזקת את כרטיס האשראי שלי. אנשים מחכים שבועיים מהחיים שלהם לרמזור שהתחלף. אתה יודע?
It's always difficult. You did a film that is quite short. It's like without the credits, like what, 4 minutes for now, 5 minutes, something like that,
Yeah,
5
yeah.
minutes. And you did film about feelings. You know, French is sensation. I tell you the word, perception, ressenti. About a kind of a future that we invent ourselves. How did you do that? I mean, what was the basis of the film? That was, about the feeling that we have sometime, or about the people that we invent, that again, the future that we invent?
That's very interesting, and I've been thinking about it a lot also in the kind of in the reference of the film that I'm making now. So I think I will start by saying that just at first when I started working on this, I had this real need to make a love story, to write a love story. And I was struggling with that for a while because I couldn't really find a love story that I wanted to tell. I couldn't find something that felt authentic to me. And then at some point came this idea of kind of writing this love story or poem or idea to someone who's doesn't exist. And then I started kind of asking my friends. I like to play these little games, so I asked my friends to write love letters to ideal men, to perfect someone, and they started writing these really beautiful poems and very like kitsch, very exaggerated letters that I really liked that it's so exaggerated and then I based really the film about that. And I think that in context of this film and just the thought that I have a lot in the last few weeks, months, or even more, is just the connection to Jerusalem, which is a very holy city for a lot of religions, for a lot of people, and there's a lot of holy places. There are a lot of not tourists, but I forgot the word actually, just people who come for religious reasons. And I think that there is something very interesting that I really like to kind of investigate, this connection between just real life and day-to-day life and this religious ideas and stories. And for me, this idea of waiting for a perfect man, it kind of relates to waiting for the Messiah or waiting for any savior that would come, any like ideal savior that would come and kind of change the world. And that's a thought that kind of goes with me for a lot of projects already, that I really like to explore this contact.
Pascal, tu avais une question.
Yes, it's about the sequence we heard about the credit card, and I was wondering what we said before, the way the simplicity of the gesture of the credit card, which comes in contradiction with what he said before, the way he was holding a credit card, and when you film it, it's very colloquial and in contradiction with what we hear. And then when you talked about religion and all that, it's always our belief changes your view, whether it is politically for religion or feelings. And was it your idea to combine that with that sequence, which grounds the movie in something more close to reality in a way?
Well, I think this is a very interesting and also very complex question, and I will try to kind of find a way to approach it from a few sides. But if we kind of come into context to what we talked about before, for example, Jerusalem and in general is a place that is it's very defined what is sacred and what is not sacred by all religions. So I think something in the act of the supermarket in the middle of the night with the neon light, like you said, that is kind of erasing all the colors and kind of taking all the drama away and leaving it in a very banal moment in life. For me, to make these moments sacred as well is a mission, even, I would say. So there is a very strong connection that actually the most magical moments can happen in the most not sacred places, like the supermarket in the middle of the night with the neon lights. So I think that is a one way of approaching the question, but maybe if you have any further questions for that, I can express more ideas from this one.
What is interesting also, and Pascal, if you want, of course, you can continue. In the film, we have small details, faces, hands, things like that. We only see parts of people. It's of course because we invent these people, and you don't use much symbolism. Actually, I think your film is quite simple in that way. Not animation like to have heavy symbolism, and is it maybe the same thing? It's because Jerusalem, it's a lot of symbolism, and you take them out of your film.
That's interesting. That's a very interesting insight. I would say, yes, I think I'm very direct also in life in general. So there's something about it that I like also to put in the film and to be kind of direct and then use the directness as a poetic moment by itself. I mean that in these direct moments it is also it becomes symbolistic, but not in the sense that it is put as a symbol, but becomes one. I think that the idea of creating these close-ups or these parts of people has also a technical reason, but it also is an inspirational reason that I just really enjoy seeing these dramatic compositions that are created when you take something and just kind of put it out of context, cut it into this part that you see. So it's interesting for me, but I think it's of course also a way that we see people in intimacy. We see parts of them. We see we see fractions. We don't see a whole person. We see the fractions because we're standing too close. And I really wanted the viewer of the film to feel that way. And I thought that that's the right way to kind of put this sentiment out of intimacy, of love, of search, all of that.
If I tell you, and maybe of course you can say no, people like Michelangelo Antonioni, John Cassavetes, director like that, that's some director that inspire you or that you like?
That's funny. I think Antonioni, we had when I was in high school, we kind of used Blow Up as a reference for a short film that we did, a few friends. It was live action, something, it disappeared. I don't know where it is in the world. It was before YouTube, so it wasn't, I don't know what happened to it, but we did kind of use him as a reference there. Then, I mean, now the last few years, I guess, of course, I would say that yes, that there was a lot of influence of that. I think also when I was making the film, I was very inspired by Sophie Calle and something about the intimacy that she creates in a lot of her works, and also the nothingness of the work that I really liked. This idea of almost work that is part of life, that is not really trying to be a work by itself, but just life as they are. So that's another name that comes up. I need to think about it more, but I have also more references that I used while making the film.
It's the way you talk about it. It's the way you recreate reality through the texture, through the movement. We don't see what it is, but we can imagine and bring something from us on what you show. Is that also something you want to convey? Say, it's you're telling your story in a very different way, and yet we can also put our own ideas, thoughts, feelings on your own story.
Mm-hmm.
If that's clear. Sorry.
No, I think it's a good remark. I mean, I think it's something that happened intuitively, I would say, just because I felt like when I create these like very close encounters with the characters, when I don't really show faces or bodies as they are, I give a sense of kind of being in the film or being with the characters, having these intimate moments of loneliness together, and not as a spectator of someone else's story. And I think that's something that I really try to create also now when I'm working on the film. It's something that I really enjoy doing, and it feels a bit even unnatural for me to have a character that is like very clear, that has a very distinct characteristics that I feel more comfortable when it's a bit vague, when the camera is kind of a character as well, when the spectator becomes also a character inside of that. I feel more comfortable there.
I was wondering how you construct the movie, because you work a lot in this movie and in the precedent also with cycles and in sound also. And I was wondering if you create an animatic before the movie, or if you kind of search around with cycles and then edit them, and I was curious about your process.
It's a valid question, and I think in Love Letter I was experimenting a lot, and I didn't really work with an animatic, and like you said, I had this I would make every loop individually, and then I would start just playing with them, combining them together, editing them. And if I had something like planned, it would kind of look like an animatic, but it was actually a work in progress while I was making the film. So I didn't have like a very specific plan when I started. I think now that I'm working on this film, I do work with an animatic more closely. I mean, I use it more because I think now it's also a longer film and it's a longer process, and I do I changed my method a little bit, because it's already, now it's a documentary. So with a documentary I work a little bit differently, because I have reference shooting that I kind of use as a first videomatic, I guess, or video, I forget the name for it, but I use that as reference, and then I kind of draw frames that are inspired by it, and I guess it makes it a bit different, the process. But still, of course, it's a breathing process. So when it goes to the sound designer, he will have a lot of his input to add, and when it goes to animation, it will, of course, become something a little bit different. So I'm really like open in this film as well, even though that it has the animatic, it has the structure. I'm still very open to see how animation and sound, how they develop from here.
And on the sound, on the one the Love Letter to the one I made up, the sound designer worked on the final editing, or you work with him before? And
well, that's important for me, because I think a lot of times in animation the sound designer comes in at a late point. But for me, maybe because the sound designer is also a good friend of mine, we work together from the start. Like, we start the project basically together. We have a lot of discussion about it. He has a lot of artistic freedom in it. He's an artist by himself, and I have a lot of trust in what he does. So he has a lot of input in that he brings into the film. And I mean, for us, it's naturally we start working on it together, really from the start. Like, not in the end stages.
ועל מצחה כתוב שם בדרך סוד. הם הזונות ותאבות האדמה. ואראה את האישה שכורה מדם קדושים. ואראה, והנה העיר הקדושה יורדת מן השמיים. והיא מותקנת ככלה המקושטת לבעלה.
Okay, so we heard the trailer, the soundtrack of the trailer of Via Dolorosa, which is going to be your next film. Your next film. We're going to talk about that. But first, I want to ask you something. Every time I watch a lot of Israeli film, we're waiting for something. It's like, I don't know if it's going for with the politics of the country and everything, but it's like something is frozen and all the characters are waiting for something to happen, and it's lots in Israeli film and especially animation. You're waiting for something to happen, and I don't know if it's part of the cultural, part of part of the political. I don't know if you have an answer about that, but
yeah, no, it's a big question. It's a big question. I'm trying to think about it, but. There's a lot to say, I think, and this is why it's complicated to really get into that, and also in films in general. And I think there is a lot to unpack there, as they say. I think that, of course, politically, the last few years has been very disparaging for a lot of Israelis, and very difficult. Moment, I think, maybe even before the last few years, but that's already something that is more of a political discussion that we can have. I think in films in general, there is a difficulty of expressing the complexity of the situation without getting into a place that is only political. And that is something that I think a lot of people who come from the region are kind of trying to balance and understand how you tell a story that has politics in it, but you do it in a personal way. You do it as a human being living in this situation, explaining how complex it is. And I have a lot of discussions about it, and I think this is something that is very important to kind of observe that in the end, as much as there is certain things that of course are very clear politically, when you come to the situation itself, and when you are in Jerusalem, for example, I would say everything is a lot more complex, because life has been so intertwined, and these cultural wars have been going on for so many years in the history of Jerusalem, that there is so many specifics, so many details. So yeah, I think it's something that a lot of people put subconsciously in their films, is this kind of their interpretation to this way of life. And I think for me, I would say, I don't want to speak for other creators, but I think for me it will be like a constant struggle of identity, how to tell my own personal story in a very complex political reality. And in fact, I think that's just creating narratives by itself. But for me, I think the secret is to how to still keep it in a very personal and intimate level, because that's where I feel that my voice is where my voice should be. And that's a challenge. That's a challenge that comes up every film now as well. This film is also very tense, very political, the film that I'm working on now, but at the same time it's very personal. So there is a lot of these tensions that I'm exploring.
Why did you want to have a... Because, well, I know a little bit about the film, and I saw something. It's really more a personal, that's something about your younger life and what you live. Why did you want at that point to make, like you said, A Love Later was also a lot of people talk, about their personal life. Well, not personal life, but the love that they wanted. But this one is really, and we here in the trailer, it's interesting because we have a lot of energy, a lot of fury in it, but a lot of calm at the beginning. And when you see the film, that's really going further like that. It's going energy and calm and energy, and it's something that you lived.
Well, yeah, I think this is something that also kind of, and I think this is also again, this is a kind of a struggle that I think comes out. It has a political sense, but there is a lot of it's more of the consequences of a political reality than the talking about the political reality itself. So I think that in a place like Jerusalem, where there is a lot of holy wars, there is a lot of wars that are based on religion, there is something that is interested me in terms of a subject to talk about the teenage rebellion against these religious archetypes, and the teenage rebellions that kind of claims holiness for itself. So when everyone is saying to you, this is holy, and this is ours, and all of this, there is something rebellious about saying, you know what, this is holy for me, and it's something that is not holy for anyone else, because no one acknowledges that. And I think this personal quest of searching what is holy for oneself is something that on one hand, of course, it's very personal, but I think in the context of Jerusalem and the history of it and the politics of it now, it's my own personal mutiny against these ideas that kind of constructed my life and had a lot. It left me with a lot of traumas and a lot of difficult experiences. And another thing is that I think those religious wars, those racist wars, they all kind of split, they infect everything. Everything is infected by that. Like the moment when people live in this reality, everything is a little bit touched by it. So I think that it doesn't matter almost about what you are talking about in that city. Everything there has this charge in it. Like the history is felt through everything. And I think that kind of showing it in a very by the way, kind of a bit banal way is for me the most natural and the most correct way to kind of show it authentically.
Just quickly, but tell it a little bit about the music, which in your new film will be even more important than A Love Later. That's really part of the film.
It's true. We've organized, just before COVID happened, we've organized few shows of musicians, local musicians from Jerusalem that are doing a wide variety of punk or experimental noise music. So the music in the film is based on the concert that we made. It was all recorded and it's used throughout the film in a lot of different ways to set the atmosphere. and it's all been very beautifully, will be also very beautifully edited and designed by Aviv Stern, who's also one of the musicians, but also he's the sound designer that I worked with also on Love Letter, so this is kind of a continuation of our work together.
Merci beaucoup Rachel.
Merci beaucoup.